Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sallam. I'm your brother Dawood. I'm the executive director. I'm your brother Dawood, the executive director of Michigan chapter of CAIR, the Council of American Islamic Relations. And we are having a session with our lead staff attorney, Sister Amy, which we will be talking about Hajj, and we are now in the month of Dhul Hijjah, which is one of the four sacred months. Some people are preparing to go to Hajj, which is one of the five pillars of Islam. So we thought that it would be appropriate to give those of you who are going to Hajj this year or have family members who are going to Hajj, that you would be able to get some information about your rights and also some tips in regards to this peculiar year, or the peculiar circumstances in terms of the fighting that's going on in the region, and the possibility of flights being canceled, which then would lead to people not having proper lodging accommodations and some maybe other potential hardships. This is a unique year, so we want to give you not only some information about your rights while traveling to and from Hajj, but also some tips in regards to if you are caught up in a somewhat difficult situation, if the fighting does resume back in that region. I'm going to excuse myself, Sister Amy. Assalamu alaikum. And then I want to come back on at the very end, inshallah, if we have some questions and answers. And if there's any gaps that to be filled in, then we'll do that as well, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Amy Ducray. I'm the lead staff attorney here at CAIR Michigan. As Brother Dawood said, we're going to be talking today about what your rights are as you travel to Hajj and really as you return from an overseas trip to Hajj. We've seen in the past on many occasions where individuals coming from Hajj specifically have earned a quadruple S status marking on their boarding pass for their return flight. And the quadruple S status can be temporary and happens to indicate that you should be subjected to additional screening, which oftentimes leads to delays as you re-enter from Customs and Border Protection. So today we're going to go over what your rights are when you're coming in through immigration or CBP, depending on how you refer to it, if you are a U.S. citizen or if you are a visa holder, including a lawful permanent resident. Those rights differ just slightly. So that's the first thing that I want to discuss is the fact that when you're coming to the U.S. through an international border, regardless of what your status is in the United States, whether you're a citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or a visa holder, you do have some form of diminished rights at the border. CBP will tell you that you have no rights at the border, which is not true if you're a U.S. citizen, but your rights are significantly diminished when you're at the border, and there are things that you have to subject yourself to, which are included in what we generally understand as primary screening. So that's when you come to the border and you present your passport and they take your picture, they scan your passport, they ask you, where did you go? Are you bringing anything back? What was the nature of your trip, et cetera, et cetera. That's primary screening. Everybody has to do primary screening at the border. And when you're doing primary screening, the questions you have to answer are related to your identity, like who you are. What is your lawful right to be in the United States? Are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a lawful permanent resident? Are you a visa holder? It includes what your travel was. So if you went to Saudi for Hajj, you could say I went to Saudi. If you had to transition through an additional country, you would say that I transitioned through Turkey, or I transitioned through Jordan, wherever you did your transition. If you didn't go straight to Saudi, you have to include all of those stops in your travel. They may ask you how long you were gone. That's a very normal question, and you have to answer it, and the nature of your trip. You just have to give like the general nature. You don't have to give specifics. And you could say, I was there for religious purposes, or the religious pilgrimage if you want to. And then they might ask you how much money you're bringing back, or are you bringing back any goods or items that you did not leave the country with, meaning did you buy substantial amount of things overseas that worth more than $10,000 that you're bringing back in the country? Those are questions that everybody has to answer at the border. What we know is that Muslims, especially returning from Hajj, are exponentially singled out for secondary screening. And this is where the questions become more intrusive. You're usually taken to the side. Sometimes they're searching your luggage. Sometimes they want your electronic devices. And what your rights are during that type of interrogation or questioning really depends on what your lawful status is inside the United States. So if you're a U.S. citizen, U.S. citizens have an unmitigated right to enter the country regardless of what CBP wants to find out from you, and regardless of whether or not you answer any additional questions. That means they can't keep you out of the United States for any reason, and they cannot delay your entry into the United States for a lengthy amount of time that becomes unreasonable, just to ask you questions that you otherwise are not obligated to answer. So as U.S. citizens, you have the right to decline to answer any questions that are outside the scope of your identity as a U.S. citizen, where you were, how long you were gone, and what you're bringing back with you. And so if you're being asked questions, about the specific religious practices, about whom you may be traveling with, who you may have met with overseas, your occupation here in the United States, your family members, whether here or in the United States, your social media usage. As a U.S. citizen, you have the absolute right to refuse to answer those questions. And no matter what, you have to be let in. And more than having a right to refuse to answer those questions, we should be refusing to answer those questions, because those are the type of unnecessary intrusive questionings that lead to making other people, especially those that we're associated with, less safe and causing them to have border interactions as well. So if you refuse to answer those questions, you're within your rights. They have to let you in. They can't keep you there just simply because you're refusing to answer. Now, as a lawful permanent resident, you also have the right to refuse to answer some questions. But doing so will likely prolong your ability to enter the country. So you may be detained a little bit longer at the border, and it may trigger an immigration consequence later, but they still have to let you in. And if you are a visa holder, however, you don't really have any rights at the border to not answer questions. And quite frankly, refusing to answer questions is very likely going to get you turned around at the border. And that's regardless of whether or not you're inside, you've already entered the United States. So for instance, if you are on an H-1B visa and you have worked in the United States for 3 or 4 years, you decide to go to Hajj and you come back, and you refuse to answer questions, they can refuse to let you into the United States, and they can return you to your home country instead of letting you in. So non-U.S. citizen visa holders need to be careful about what questions they're not answering. And we do know that visa holders are being asked questions about their political ideology, both national politics and international politics, and their social media usage, and being required to turn over years and years of social media usage. So just keep that in mind. So U.S. citizens can refuse to answer questions after a certain time, can ask for counsel at the border. Lawful permanent residents can refuse to answer questions, but cannot ask for counsel at the border, and might be delayed for refusing to answer questions, but will ultimately be let in. Visa holders have no right to counsel and no right to refuse questions at the border, and doing so will likely get you turned around. If you are a visa holder and you think that you're going to get turned around, you can just simply ask them to withdraw your request for admissions, and they will let you return. And then you could come back a different day through a different port and try to re-enter, because you haven't actually been denied entry. So that's a strategy that you could use if it feels like you might not be let in after your trip to Hajj. Now, there's a lot of questions around electronic seizures at the border. We saw an increase over the last year of the amount of people getting their electronics either seized or requested at the border. And this becomes a little trickier. So electronics at the border are really treated as a container, the same as your suitcase, the same as your handbag, and what have you. So CBP will tell you that they have a right to access your electronic device the same way that they have access to inspect your luggages. That's just not the case if you're a U.S. citizen. So if CBP asks you to turn over your electronic device and hand it to them physically, no matter if you're a U.S. citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or a visa holder, you are physically required to turn over that device, whether it's your laptop, your cell phone, or your iPad or tablet. You have to physically hand it over. However, if you are a U.S. citizen and you have a password or a passcode, so either alphanumeric numeric only, or even like the little swipe patterns that people do sometimes, if you have that on your phone, you are under no obligation as a US citizen to turn that password over to the CBP officer, nor are you required to open your phone so that they can look at it. And you shouldn't do that. They, as a US citizen, they need, at a minimum, they need a reasonable suspicion to believe that there's information on that phone that is either involving criminal activity at the border or some kind of national security problem at the border. And then they're required to technically seek judicial approval to enter that device. We know that's not happening. We know that they're breaking into devices, but there's a significant difference between you turning over your phone voluntarily and them doing something they're not supposed to do. Because if they access information on your phone that you have not voluntarily given to them, there's ways to request them to destroy that information and to hold them accountable for doing that. But once you've turned over the phone, opened it, or provided the password, you have now volunteered that information. And volunteering information from your cell phone makes everybody in your cell that you've ever had contact with in your cell phone less safe and subject to surveillance, questioning, and border problems. What we've seen is that CBP is really interested in who we're communicating with on our devices, whether that be through social media, WhatsApp, text messaging, or just generally who's in our contact list. Those are all the things that they're really looking for on your phone when they try to access it. And that's so that they can sort of map our community. So it's always better to refuse and assert your rights. That's why we have them, is because the founders of this great nation were relatively aware of the concerns and the danger of government overreach when it comes to our private information, like who we're talking to and associating with. That's why the First Amendment exists, and it's why the last 6 amendments to the U.S. Constitution exist, quite frankly. If you are a lawful permanent resident, you can refuse to open your phone. It's very likely they will take it and they will crack it and sort of extract the data with a device like Gray Key or Pegasus or something like that. If that is the case, then it's still legally it's still better that you didn't give permission and you just allowed them to take your phone, quite frankly. If you are a visa holder, meaning a non-immigrant visa holder, so student visa, H-1B visa, visitor visa, fiance visa, whatever may have you, you don't have a right to not allow access to your phone. You are required to turn your phone over. You are required to open it up and let them go through it. However, CBP is limited in going through your phone to whatever they find on the phone without internet access. So that would be your text messaging, your like any email that is already loaded, things that are already loaded on your phone without having to actually access the internet. So anytime CBP searches your phone, that's what they're technically limited to searching: your pictures, contacts, cell phone calls, text messages, any WhatsApp that's not that's already on the phone that doesn't require internet access to access it. So, and that's really what they're interested in anyways. So there are some steps that you can take to protect your electronic device, whether you're a US citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or a visa holder prior to traveling. We always suggest that if you're traveling overseas, and especially if you know that you've been targeted for secondary screening previously, that you travel with what we call a trusted traveler device. I think the kids call it like a burner phone, right? You're going to get a phone, a cheap phone that you don't need, that doesn't have every single piece of information from your life on it. My phone has a lot of information, medical records and whatnot on it that I would not want somebody to have access to. But I travel with a cheap Android phone that I paid like $90 for on Amazon, and I only download like what's exactly important to have on that phone. For instance, just a handful of contacts that I need in case of an emergency. And I download my emails, like an email app, so that the email is not like downloaded to my phone, it's just on the app. And then I make sure I have a password on my phone that is not from my biometrics, right? I'm not allowing face recognition to open my phone or my thumbprint to open my phone or other electronic devices, because they can force you to open it with your face or your thumbprint, but not with a password. And then, so I'm doing all of that. And then when I return into the United States, the first thing I'm doing before I return is I'm deleting all unnecessary information off of my phone. I'm backing all of my images that I took while I was at Hajj. I'm backing them up to the cloud, and I'm signing out of that cloud-based device. If I had WhatsApp on my phone to communicate with family members, I am signing out of WhatsApp and, getting it off of my phone. If I had social media on my device, I am logging out of my social media, forgetting all of my passwords and deleting the app on my phone. So that if my phone does get seized at the border because I refuse to open it and refuse to turn it over, the only thing they're getting is a handful of people that are the most important contacts that I have in case of an emergency, and none of my actual personal information. So those are ways that you can actually protect yourself. Some things to keep in mind as we're coming through customs at Hajj is that you can carry Zamzam water in your checked luggage. That's perfectly acceptable. And like that's a known thing in the United States by this point. You can also carry dates. There's a lot of questions about whether you can carry fruits and vegetables on the plane. You can carry dates as long as they're packaged properly and you tell customs that you're carrying these dates. And you have to like allow them to be inspected should they decide to inspect the dates at the border. You can't carry any more money than $10,000. And I think this is very, very important for people to understand, because both when you leave the United States, but also when you return to the United States, you cannot have more than $10,000 or more on your person. And if you do, they can seize it at the airport. And this includes when you are leaving the country. We have every year a handful of people that we work with CBP to try to get their money back to them after it's been seized at the airport, because there's a misunderstanding about how much money you can have. And it's not per person, it's per group that's traveling. So for instance, if you and your wife are traveling to Hajj together, and you can, between the two of you, can only carry $10,000. So your wife can carry 5, you can carry 5, or the husband can carry 10, but the wife can't carry 10 and the husband can't carry 10 at the same time, because CBP will take all of your money. They will take all $20,000. They will send you home from the airport, and then you will have to fight for 5 or 6 months to get that money back, and then you'll pay a fine on it. So if you're traveling with your family, the family itself can have $10,000 and not a penny more amongst every person that's traveling. And then also, I know when I was at Hajj a few years ago, alhamdulillah, there was a lot of people who were buying gold as gifts for their loved ones over here, because gold has a tendency to be cheaper in Saudi than it is over here. But if you're buying more than $10,000 worth of gold, you are required to carry the receipts and declare that as well. If you don't, they can seize it. They can make you pay fines and duties and taxes on it at the airport. So it's always better to fill out the proper paperwork and have that filled up. So also, Brother Dowd wanted me to mention, and I think it's very important, that this is a very, very unique Hajj season where there is a lot of conflict going on overseas. We have seen handful after handful of canceled and delayed flights, and which has caused significant travel disruptions to this specific region. We know right now that there is this temporary pause on the bombing and the fighting over there, so it's a little bit clearer. But we also know with the movement of Muslims, especially for important events like Ramadan and Hajj, we've seen escalation in the area previously, and we can anticipate that there's a possibility that during the Hajj season, there will be an escalation in the violence overseas as a manner to disrupt the Hajj season. So there are some steps you can take to protect yourself. First of all, if you are traveling through a travel agency, or you've purchased tickets through a travel agency or on your credit card, always buy the insurance in case something happens and you cannot fly. You can get your money back. Number 2, you should be filling out what's called a STEP application through the federal government, and that's STEP. You can fill that application out, and it just basically tells the U.S. government, hey, I'm going to go to Saudi. I'm going to be there for 15 days. Here's the place I'm going to be. Here's the hotel I'm staying at. That way, if something happens and you get stranded overseas because, maybe Air Jordan's not flying out anymore from Saudi for like a 2-week period, and you need to get home to your kids, to your job, to whatever, you can contact the embassy or the consulate in Saudi, and they'll help you book a flight. They'll help repatriate you home so that you can get home safely in case you can't get another flight out, or the flights are too expensive and you don't have the ability to pay on the spot. So they'll book that flight for you. You'll pay them back periodically over time, but you will be safe and you will be able to get home. And this is also true for people who are in transition, right? So if you have a layover and maybe you've made it from Saudi to like Jordan, but Jordan's not flying from Jordan anymore because of airspace concerns, the U.S. will help repatriate you from Jordan through other means than commercial airlines. So it's important to fill out that STEP application before you travel, and so that your travel's safe, inshallah. So the key takeaways are from this presentation is that you have limited rights at the border. U.S. citizens only have to identify themselves, where they've been, what they brought back with them, and then they have to be let in the country without undue delay. And they can request an attorney if they are stopped. They have to hand over their cell phone, but they do not have to open it. Lawful permanent residents can refuse to answer questions other than the same ones as the U.S. citizen, but they are not entitled to an attorney at the border, and they do not have to open their cell phone device, but having refused to do so may be subjected to additional time at the border or increased likelihood of an electronic seizure at the border, and also could trigger immigration consequences down the line. And visa holders don't really have rights at the border. The visa just affords you the right to come to the border, knock at the door, and ask to be let in. And refusing to open your cell phone device or answer questions could have you turned back around to your home country, even if you've already been let into the United States previously. And that we should all be putting a password on our cell phone, carrying a burner or a trusted traveler device, and keeping as little information on our cell phone and electronic devices as possible as we travel. Fill out that STOP application and make yourself safe, inshallah. Did I miss anything, Brother Dawood?
Mention about the amount of cash traveling.
Oh, yes. $10,000 cash total amongst all the people in your family that are traveling. If you are traveling as a family unit, $10,000 is the most you're allowed to carry amongst every single person. And that includes like extended family if you've booked your trips together. So even if we have adult children and adult parents and we live in separate households, but we've booked our travel together as a group, like 4 tickets on the same itinerary, all 4 people can have only a total of $10,000 cash on them when they both leave the country and also re-enter the United States, inshallah.
Thank you, Sister Amy. I'll mention 2 other points or reiterate one and then mention something else, practical advice. Maybe it's not, we could say CAIR-Michigan specific, but to mention it anyway. So number 1, I know of individuals, and Sister Amy and I have known of people who've done this in the past, but I know of a particular family this year. They're not going through one of the groups that is approved through Nusuk. They are going through a travel group in which they have a passport for another country. Let's use Pakistan, for instance. Mm-hmm. They're flying from America to Qatar, from Qatar to Pakistan, and then they're going to take their tour group, and then they're going to fly in to Medina from Pakistan. Just keep in mind that when you come back to America, you have to tell people at customs all of the countries that you went to. Don't skip any countries. Even if you're using a different passport, you should tell them every country. So don't skip that you went to Pakistan and then you pit stopped in Iran on the way back, and then you came back to JFK. Please don't do that. You need to tell them everything and be truthful, because as it is illegal, it is legal for federal law enforcement to lie to you, but it's illegal for you to lie to them. And that includes leaving out facts. They would include that as not being truthful, and you can get yourself in legal trouble. Mm-hmm. But the other points, besides what Sister Amy said in terms of the visa, if you have your Hajj, if you had your Hajj plans already, then you have your Hajj plans. But as she mentioned, having a visa does not automatically allow you back in. So it is our advice, generally speaking, that during this particular political atmosphere and this administration, at this time, do not leave the United States of America unless you absolutely have to, because you may not make it back in. The third thing, which is practical, I know of people who've gotten things stolen coming from Hajj from their luggage. So just as a general practice, I know in some cultures, South Asians in particular, they go to Mecca or Medina, and it's like custom for people to buy a piece of gold for their daughter so that they can have it for their wedding, or buying gold. And as we know, the quality of gold is higher there than general 10 karat or 14 karat gold that's sold here. There's like 22 karat gold.
Mhm.
If you're going to do that, either wear it or put it in your bag on the way back. Do not check it in your luggage. I know someone personally who, on a connection flight back from France to come back to Detroit, got their luggage pilfered and lost thousands of dollars worth of gold. And there's nothing that you're going to be able to do about it with the Nusuk company or the Hajj company, nor with the airline. Your stuff is just gone, and you're not going to get your gold back. So it's just practical advice for the sisters and the aunties who are going to Hajj. If you're going to get gold, keep that gold on you. And there's no questions. We'll wait a second to see if there's any questions being posed. Otherwise, if not, we shall close out. And for those of you who are going, please, after you pray for yourselves and for your family members, then please include your brothers and sisters at CAIR Michigan in your supplications, especially on the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, which is the day of Arafah, the best day of making dua, according to our beloved prophet, peace be upon him. I think we shall close there. Thank you very much, Sister Amy. And if you have any problems in your international travels, please contact us at CAIR Michigan immediately. Give us a call so that we can intake that information and see if we can redress any problems that you've had upon border re-entry. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.